and we're back, and we're going to start looking for areas where we can put our darks in, and in and around the face, in the background. I want to go ahead and bring in some more color here on the neckline. This is a area that's going to get a lot darker in value, and so I need to put a little more flesh down before I can put my shadow in. I want to get in a little bit of shirt color, and it's always good to add in color and get rid of the white where you can do that. So I'm going to be using a alizarin crimson with just a little French ultramarine blue for the collar, and just going to be using my number 8 to lie that in. And then it gets lighter out toward the outside of the collar, so I will use a little water and pull it out so that the color is lighter on the outside. Rinsing my brush, I'm just going to add a little water, and that will lighten that outside. And it's good to get a dark in and around the face. I'm going to be using a little bit of French ultramarine and burnt umber to give a little bit of dark right next to his face here, and just increments of dark so that I have something to judge my value off of as I darken the shadows in his face. And I could also put in a dark up here. It's always good to look at your painting and decide where your darks are going to be. This can really make a strong painting. And I don't have to paint the whole area. I just want to get in a dark, and I can kind of pull it out into the other section just by adding water. And then I can go back in later and deepen all the other areas that I need to. But I just really wanted to create an edge there so that I could frame the face a little bit and know where I'm going. Now on this side, the hair is actually darker, not the background. So you have to pay attention to what your edges are doing. This side I'm going to be using French ultramarine and alizarin crimson, and I'm using the tip of my brush. I'm resting my pinky finger so that I steady my hand and I can put in the color, and I can soften it by flattening the brush out a little bit. And then I want to come on the side of the face with a little bit of alizarin crimson and French ultramarine. And I want to give an edge where the hair meets the head. And I'm coming around the glasses, and I have to paint around where the brass and the glass are lighter. And then I want to lay in a little water so that this softens my edge, and I want to give a little water for that to move out into that area. And this is not quite as soft as I would like it, so I'm just going to go right along and pull that out. Now I can come down the rest of the way and give an edge. And then my edge stops here and it gets darker on the neck and the shirt side there. So paying close attention to what my edges do. Now I want to go into the crevice areas where we put the crevice flesh. So I'm going to be adding the same color combination of alizarin crimson and French ultramarine, and they are mixed on the palette. So using my number 2 legend, I'm going to mix up a really strong shadow color that has very little water. It's handled the same way the crevice flesh was handled. Not a lot of water. And this is what gives you your depth and your shadow. And here too, there are some lighter areas, so you don't have to do the whole thing. You can skip some areas if they're lighter. And this is how you add depth and dimension to your portraits. And then you can soften your edge. You can actually soften both sides, but you don't want to use a lot of water because you may have some unwanted blooms, and it will be harder to control. I can drag some of that purple down beside that bottom lip and have a little bit of purple there, but I don't want to overdo it. I like to make my purple on the red side. Blue tends to just end up looking a bit dirty, and I don't like the way it looks used by itself, or a purple that's more on the blue side, generally speaking. So more oftentimes I like to use a purple, a red purple. And then you can go into the nostrils and add your dark there. And you can pull this around on the bottom side of the nostril, the flare of the nostril. It's actually the bottom side of the flare. I'm going to soften that. And let's add some purple to and around the eyes so that we can put the eye color in. And once we get the eyes in, that's when we're really encouraged to move forward. Usually starts to look like the person a little bit once you get the eyes in. Softening my edges. And let's do the same to the right side. Softening my edges. Very important in portraits to have a soft edge. You can go into this little dark area beside the glasses. And also a dark area on the top of that flare in the nostril. And let's add a little to this side. And we're going to move up to a larger brush and put in a shadow on the next side here. And this is really about the same color of the shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and do the shirt while I'm at it. And I'm going to switch brushes using a number 8. Lay that in. Dragging it down toward the bottom. And for the stripes, I would put my red down first and then go back with the blue. Go ahead and pull this up into this part of the shirt. And maybe the eyes will be, the darks around the eyes will be dry, so we can go ahead and put in the eye color. I'm going to add a little color to the eyes, but before we do that, I want to use my angle shader. This is a 1/2 inch Cheap Joe's angle shader, and I want to soften a hard edge on the highlight of the forehead. And this is a great brush for fixing hard edges and unwanted lines in paint, and it is very easy on the paper and does not harm the paper, so I really like these brushes for that purpose. Let's say I want to soften this edge here. I just rub it lightly and then blot it, and it will soften that edge and works very nicely for that. Let's go ahead and work on the irises. I'm going to be using Winsor Blue, green shade, and French Ultramarine. And I need to knock it down just a little bit with a brown, so I'm using some burnt umber in with my mixture. Now, his eyes are blue, so I'm going to come around the outer edge of the eye or iris, and I'm going to paint the edge dark, and then over the top of the eye, and he's got a nice highlight, so I'm going to give a dark right there around the highlight as well. So then I'm going to add just a little bit of water, and I'm going to pull it in, soften my edge, and the way to have a highlight really stand out is to paint a dark around it. So that's what I've done here. And typically blue eyes sometimes will have some gold or yellow around the pupil, so I'm going to drop that in, and I don't want it to do too much mixing and look blue, so I'm just dropping it in. This above the highlight is the pupil, and I'll just leave that and come back and paint that when it's dry. So I'm going to do the same to the right eye. And the way to get a glassy looking eye, which is what you want, is by leaving the center light and painting the outside of the iris darker. And it looks more rounded and will be the shape that you're looking for, but will also give that glassy look. And that's what I'm looking for. And I'll do the same for this side. I will drop in some Winsor yellow while it's wet, and then we will move back to the lips and bring them up a little bit more. I'm going to go back to my Winsor yellow and strengthen this color up. Opera rose, and I can add some in this area. There's a highlight above his lip, and if I get a dark in above it, that'll bring out the highlight. And then all I'll have to do is add a little water in between. So I'm paying close attention to the shapes that are in and around the mouth that create the mustache, darkening them up a little bit. Bringing some more color down from below the nose. And this side is particularly darker, so I'm going to strengthen this up with Opera Rose. Now see more browns in his mustache on this side. So I could also add in a little bit of burnt sienna and alizarin crimson and get in some browner tones on this side. So there's a little bit of a change in color temperature on this side. I want to go ahead and soften that. And when I get through with the mustache, if the lights are too light, you can always go over it with the blue to tone down the lights. And the next color that I would put on here would be a purple to strengthen the darks in the mustache. So let's see. I like to squint to see where my darks and lights are. This helps me to be able to see better where I need to put them in. A lot of little shapes. Now the bottom lip is too light, so let's go ahead and add more color, especially to the right side. And we'll drag it over and under on this side. I'm going to switch to a little larger brush. This is a number 6, and it's got some paint in it, so I'm going to tap the bottom of my water container and get the paint out that's in there so that I can have a clean brush. Windsor Yellow and Opera Rose for my flesh still. This is looking a little yellow in here, so let's strengthen that up. When a section is too much of one color, just go back with the other color you were using with it and it should even it out. Add a little bit more flesh and round out this cheek here. Now let's go back and put in the pupils in the eye, but before we do, we need to strengthen up the cheek on this side, and I'm going to move to a little bit bigger brush and darken that up. And then this whole section under the lip could be darkened up. Careful to save your highlights. That's the hardest thing about watercolor, is you have to save your highlights. Adding in a little bit of reddish purple here to create the chin. Nice purple in here that pushes this little area back. And let's add a little bit of shadowing under the eyes. And above the eyes where the glasses are tinted. So basically, to create that tint, you just add purple. And I need to clean that up a little bit. And it doesn't need to be solid. There are still darks and lights within the tint of the glasses. This side is slightly darker. And since we've gotten that all wet, let's give a little shadow. Now that's a little blue, so I'm going to mix a little more red in with it and go back down that bridge of the nose. And there's a little purple on this side. And I'm going to soften that edge. And we can add a little bit of shadowing under this lip here and in the corner of the mouth. So we'll go ahead and add in the pupils. And lash line with French ultramarine and burnt umber. And I don't want to have a lot of water in it. I want it to be able to stay where I put it. So I like to wipe my brush off frequently so that I don't have a loaded brush. I have more control over the paint when it's not loaded. So I do a lot of wiping off my brush. Watercolor tends to grow, so it's better if you can have control, unless you're trying to paint loosely, and that's what you're going for. I like to do a little of both. I like to generally paint large washes in the beginning, and then closer toward finishing up, I put in the fine details with smaller brushes and less water. And that's the same fleshy color I'm using for the glasses in Windsor Yellow and Opera Rose. We need to dry this, so we're going to stop and we'll come back and try to finish up the details.